Over the past several months, something quiet has been shifting inside the Social Security system. No major headlines, no dramatic announcements. But for anyone who studies administrative patterns closely, the signals have been visible for some time. Changes that were authorized months ago are now completing their processing cycle and reaching individual bank accounts. Recalculations that were promised are arriving as real deposits. And for millions of Americans, particularly those who spent any portion of their careers in public service, March 2026 represents a meaningful turning point in how their retirement income is actually structured. If this kind of analysis is useful to you, take a moment right now to subscribe and leave a like. This content is built for people who want to understand what is coming before it arrives, not after. That is the entire reason to pay attention here. Now, let us get into what is actually happening, why most people are unprepared for it, and what that means for your financial position going forward. The reason most people miss early administrative shifts is straightforward. They are waiting for a formal announcement. They expect a clear, plain language notice explaining exactly what changed, when it changed, and what to do next. That expectation is reasonable. It is also not how large administrative systems tend to communicate. What actually happens is this: legislation passes, processing begins, recalculations move through a queue, letters go out, some arrive, some do not. And in the meantime, bank accounts begin showing different numbers, and people start calling their financial institutions for explanations that those institutions simply cannot provide. That gap between when the system processes a change and when a person understands that change has occurred is exactly where confusion concentrates. So let us walk through the mechanics of what is happening right now, because understanding the structure removes most of the anxiety. Two federal provisions have been eliminated: the Windfall Elimination Provision and the Government Pension Offset. These were regulatory frameworks embedded inside federal law for more than 4 decades. They systematically reduced Social Security benefits for individuals who also received pensions from employers that did not participate in the Social Security system: public school teachers, municipal firefighters, state government employees, nurses employed by public hospitals, federal workers hired under certain legacy retirement systems. For all of these people, Social Security benefit calculations were quietly adjusted downward year after year. Most never fully understood why their payment fell short of what their earnings record suggested it should be. They simply adapted their retirement budgets to whatever number arrived each month and accepted it as permanent. That number is now changing. The legislation eliminating both provisions was signed into law in late 2024. Since then, the Social Security Administration has been running recalculations. The administrative queue for something this scale is significant. There are millions of affected accounts. Each one requires its own individual recalculation based on work history, pension size, and the specific duration those provisions were applied. March 2026 is a period when a large volume of those recalculations is completing and landing in actual beneficiary accounts. Here is where people unintentionally create problems for themselves. When a deposit arrives that is significantly larger than expected and no one has explained why, the instinct is to treat it as a possible error. Some people contact their bank asking for the deposit to be held or returned. That creates a processing complication that takes considerably longer to resolve than simply understanding what the deposit represents. Others spend days calling the wrong institution entirely, their bank rather than the Social Security Administration, receiving no useful information and accumulating unnecessary stress. For someone who received a $300 monthly benefit reduction over 6 years, the retroactive deposit now arriving could approach $21,600. Not a small number, not something you encounter in your account without immediate questions forming. Knowing this is coming, knowing what it represents, and knowing exactly which number to call and which portal to access, that is the entire difference between a disorienting week and a composed afternoon of review. Now let us address the net deposit calculation, because this is where the largest number of beneficiaries encounter confusion, regardless of public sector background. Your Social Security gross benefit increased in 2026 by 2.5%. That is the cost of living adjustment for this year. For someone receiving $2,000 monthly, that represents an additional $50 on paper. But your net deposit, the actual figure arriving in your account, also reflects Medicare Part B premium changes. Those premiums also increased this year. If your premium rose by $10, your real net increase is $40, not $50. For certain higher income beneficiaries, premium increases exceeded their cost of living adjustment entirely, meaning their March net deposit is actually lower than their December deposit, despite the announced increase. This is not an error. This is two separate administrative systems, Social Security and Medicare, each making their own annual adjustments, with those adjustments interacting inside a single deposit figure. Understanding that interaction before you see the deposit transforms a confusing bank statement into straightforward, explainable information. There is also the layer of income-related monthly adjustment amounts. If your modified adjusted gross income exceeded certain thresholds in 2024, your 2026 Medicare premiums are calculated at a higher tier. The system uses tax returns from 2 years prior, so your current premium reflects income from 2 years ago. If your income has decreased significantly since then, you may qualify for a reconsideration of those premium tiers, but that reconsideration only happens if you request it. The system does not initiate it automatically. Here is where small procedural gaps compound into larger financial consequences. Not because the system works against you, because the system processes what it has. If you do not submit updated information, it processes old information. Now let us be precise about what is not happening, because this is where rumor and administrative reality diverge most significantly. There is no widespread benefit reduction underway. There is no mass reclassification of eligibility occurring. The modifications arriving in March are the direct result of legislation passed through Congress and signed into law. The recalculations happening now exist because provisions were removed, not added. For the vast majority of beneficiaries with no public sector employment history and no pension from a non-covered employer, March simply represents the standard annual adjustment cycle, a slightly different net deposit, a familiar Wednesday payment schedule, nothing more unusual than any other year-opening transition. The population experiencing genuinely significant changes is specific: public school teachers, state and municipal government employees, federal workers under certain retirement systems, law enforcement officers with public pensions, nurses employed by public hospital systems. If that describes any portion of your working career, this month carries considerably more weight for you than for the average beneficiary. Now let us move into what preparation actually looks like, not dramatic preparation, practical, low-effort steps that take an afternoon and prevent months of potential confusion. Start with your online account at ssa.gov, log in this week, review your gross benefit amount and your net deposit amount separately. Understand what deductions appear between those two figures. If you see Medicare Part B deductions, Part D deductions, or any additional withholdings, confirm that each reflects your current enrollment and your current income tier. If anything looks inconsistent with what you expect, you now have the framework to ask informed, specific questions. If you held any public sector position during your working years, contact the Social Security Administration directly. The number is 1-800-772-1213. Have your Social Security number ready along with your public sector employment dates and the name of your pension system. Ask specifically whether your benefit was ever calculated under either the Windfall Elimination Provision or the government pension offset, and whether a recalculation for your account has been processed or remains pending. Following up accelerates processing, waiting does not. Verify your mailing address and banking information inside your online account today. Confirm your direct deposit routing number and account number reflect your current banking relationship. If you change banks in the past year, updating this now prevents payment disruptions that can take weeks to untangle. Mail forwarding through the Postal Service does not reliably redirect official Social Security correspondence. If you moved and only updated your address with the post office but not directly with the Social Security Administration, recalculation letters and retroactive payment notifications may not reach you. Those documents have real value for tax filing and future benefit inquiries. If a large retroactive deposit arrives and you are uncertain whether it belongs in your account, do not attempt to return it or place a hold on it without first contacting the Social Security Administration for confirmation, acting on the assumption that it is an error when it is actually a legitimate recalculation creates administrative complications that are entirely avoidable. The pattern here is straightforward. March is a month of administrative completion. Changes authorized months ago are arriving now in concentrated volume. For people who understand what those changes represent, this is simply an informational month. Confirm your numbers, review your deductions, verify your personal details. For people who encounter these changes without context, it can feel disorienting even when the changes are entirely positive. Preparation here requires no expertise. It requires attention and a willingness to spend part of one afternoon reviewing information that is already accessible to you through your online account and a single phone number. The Social Security Administration maintains detailed records of your benefit calculation. Your online account gives you access to those records at any time. The phone line connects you to representatives who can explain your specific situation. These resources exist precisely for moments like this one. If your situation involves specific details you would like to discuss, describe it in the comments below. Comments are reviewed and responses are provided where possible. And as always, what is offered here is general informational analysis only. It is not legal or financial advice. For guidance specific to your individual circumstances, consult a qualified professional. Understanding what the system is doing before it affects you is always the stronger position. That is the only reason to be paying attention.